Okay, so in this video, I wanted to share my thoughts and tips for getting ranked onto the first page of Amazon for your niche / keywords. Now, I actually think this is one of the most important areas of publishing a book through Amazon that we really don't talk about enough, okay? Because it's very important that we get our books ranked onto the first pages of Amazon, or it's unlikely that people are actually going to be able to find our book in order to purchase it, okay? So before I get into this video, if you're interested in following my Amazon FBA journey, which is basically selling physical products through Amazon, feel free to subscribe to my second channel, which is called Raydog FBA. I'm going to leave a link in the description for you to go and subscribe and check that out. So there's only, at the time of recording this video, there's only one video on there which talks a little bit about what Amazon FBA is and what my results and thoughts have been so far, okay? But I highly suggest, if you're interested in a different business model or one that goes alongside your publishing, which this does perfectly, then you go ahead and check out my second channel and subscribe to that. Okay, so back to this video. Now, I made a video last week which was very long, where I did touch upon this, but given the length of that video, I don't think that most people would have actually gotten that far and seen the part where I spoke about this. So I wanted to make this video today on just this topic and talk about it in more detail, because I do believe it's very important. So as previously stated, the importance of being found on Amazon is everything. It should be obvious that if you don't have any eyes on your books, then you're not going to make any sales for your books, okay? And in my opinion, this is something that you need to consider before you even start creating your book, okay? Because you don't want to waste your time creating something or hiring someone to create something that's just going to get lost on Amazon. So whether you're creating low content books, medium content books, or higher content books, you need to factor this in. And also, the reality that we live in when it comes to Amazon KDP and publishing online is that just because you can create a good book with a good cover and a good interior, it's not going to be enough to just be good at one thing, because you also need to be able to market your book and also find where you can fit in on Amazon, given the vast amounts of competition, okay? So this aspect of publishing is just important as the other side of things, which I tend to talk about, which is, you know, the quality of the book and actually being able to offer your customers something of value, etc. So here's what I do every time I consider creating a new book for Amazon KDP, okay? So the very first thing that I do, no matter what the niche is or what type of book that I'm interested in creating, the first thing I do is to ask myself, how hard is it going to be for me to get this book ranked onto the first page of Amazon, okay? Because there's going to be one of three ways that you're going to end up on the first page of Amazon, okay? So the first way is obviously organically. The second way is going to be through running ads. So if you run ads to your books, you can push your book up the rankings onto the first page. Or the third way, which is going to be through luck. So ask yourself here, do you ever actually think about this before publishing a book? If not, then the chances are that you're publishing low content books and relying on luck. And even worse, what you might be doing is creating awesome books and relying on luck. Or even worse than that is you might be spending months and months or weeks and weeks and weeks or however long it is, and then still relying on luck. And that's one of the reasons why people's success rate when it comes to publishing a book is so low. Like, you'll see people have like 1 in 100 or 1 in 200 of their books that actually start making sales. It's because they're relying on luck. Now, that's a business model that I'm not willing to get into at the moment. It's not something that I actively pursue, and it's not what I'm going to be talking about in this video. It's not for me, but just know that's probably the reason why people are uploading so many books onto Amazon, is because they're just relying on luck. So what I'm going to do in this video is to give a few examples, because I think that's going to be the best way to show you how I think you should approach publishing a book before you even start having that book made, okay? So for this example, I'm going to be using unicorn coloring books. So let's say, for example, that we were interested, we saw that the unicorn coloring books were hot selling books, which they obviously are, and we were interested in creating our own unicorn coloring book to sell on Amazon. And what we want to do here is to assume that anything that is unicorn coloring book related is going to be our competition, okay? So if you scroll through the first few pages, I'm not going to bore you by doing this so slowly, but you already know that the first few pages, or loads of these pages, they're going to be stacked full of lots of different types of books that are somewhat related to unicorn coloring books, okay? So once we can see, after all these pages that we've gone through, all the different types of unicorn coloring books, all the way through Amazon. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these unicorn coloring books. Unicorn coloring book, there's just so many of these types of books. Now, you have to assume to yourself that if you were to create a unicorn coloring book and upload it onto Amazon, what do you think the chances of you being found or just placed onto the first page are? You've made a unicorn coloring book, you think it's going to sit up here next to these two books? Of course it isn't. You might get unbelievably lucky, but you might also win the lottery. But we're not going to be relying on luck for this, okay? So the broader the niche is, the harder it's going to be to get ranked on the first page for that, okay? So again, it doesn't matter whether you've spent a day making this book. It doesn't matter whether you're an incredibly good designer. It doesn't matter if you've spent a year making your unicorn coloring book. If you cannot get found on Amazon, you will not make those sales no matter how good it is, okay? And if you upload it with the attitude that, I'm good at making designs, I can illustrate and stuff like that, you're going to have a bad time because you are still not going to get found. And Amazon isn't going to magically give you preferential treatment. There's zero reason to expect that, okay? You need to always keep this in mind before you publish a book. You need to think to yourself, where is this book, when I publish this book, where is it going to likely end up on Amazon? So that now leaves us with three different options here. So the first option is that we run ads to this book, okay? We have a unicorn coloring book, and what we want to do is get found on the first page. So to boost our rankings, we run ads to the unicorn coloring book, and then it gets found on the first page, okay? So the second option is that we niche down, okay? So the more that we niche down, the less competition that there is, and the more chances that we get found, the more chances there are of getting found on the first page, which makes sense. Then there's the third option, which is to do both, which is to niche down and also run ads to our books, okay? So again, let's carry on using the unicorn coloring book as an example here, okay? So we checked out on Amazon that the competition for this type of book is very, very stiff. Our direct competition, anything unicorn coloring book related, very stiff. We're not going to get found organically on the front page, okay? So the next option that we went for was to run ads to this book. Now, when it comes to running ads to your book, the main concern here that you need to think about is how much money am I going to have to spend to get ranked onto the first page, okay? So when it comes to this unicorn coloring book niche here, let's try and establish what the demand is for these books, because the higher the demand, the more money we're going to have to spend on ads. If you just look at things that way, if there's a ton of demand, if there's a lot of buyer traffic going to these type of books, you're going to have to assume that in order to run ads to these books, you're going to be spending more money, okay? So there are ways that we can establish this by using software and whatnot, but for the sake of this video, let's just do it in the most simplistic form and just try and get an idea as to how much buyer traffic is going to unicorn coloring books. So obviously what we can do here is use the BSRs, and what we're going to see is that they're ranked unbelievably low. Anything unicorn coloring book is ranked so low on the first few pages of Amazon, like 200, 5,000, 8,000, 3,000, 21,000, 14,000, 2,000, 8,000, 36,000, 53,000, 27,000, and it goes on and on. Like, these rankings for unicorn coloring books are incredibly low, which means there is a ton of buyer traffic going to these books, okay? There's an absolute boatload of traffic going to these books, which means that our ad spend would have to be very high to get ourselves ranked onto the first page for all these buyers to see these books, okay? It's a hot niche, it's incredibly hot. A lot of people want unicorn coloring books for whatever reason, but you want to get there, you're going to have to pay for it, and it's going to be a lot of money. So just to give you some perspective here, I'm going to use a book of mine as an example, an experiment I did 6 or 7 months ago. I created a toddler coloring book, which was crazy because there's no way I was going to make money from it. It was a very, very broad niche, just like unicorn coloring book. It's a very broad niche. So what I tried to do, what I had in mind, was that if I created a toddler coloring book and then run ads to it, I could get onto the front page and get all those juicy sales next to all these low BSR books, right? So if I just go and search for toddler coloring book. Okay, so this is probably even worse than the unicorn coloring book because this is so broad. I don't even know why I did this, but what happened is I ended up spending £200 to £300 that month trying to get the book ranked onto the first page with all these other crazy books, and I ended up on, I don't even know what page it was, page 5. I'd already spent like 200 quid on this book. I spent a fair bit getting it made, and I spent quite a lot with the ads. and then it got to the point where it's only sat on that page like 4, 5, 6 or something like that. And I was thinking to myself, like, how much more money am I going to have to spend to get it ranked onto the first page with all these other books? And I looked at it and I thought to myself, that's going to cost a small fortune to get that ranked up there. So eventually I just gave up on that. It was a waste of money, it was a waste of time. And any of these like really broad niches like this that are hot in demand, anything that's super hot in demand and super broad, you're going to have a hard time. You won't get ranked organically unless you get lucky, and you're going to have to spend a ton of money to get ranked on the first page if you decide to go that route. Okay, so where does that leave us now with our unicorn coloring book? So that leaves us with the second option, which is to niche down. Okay, so like I say, the purpose of niching down is to try and enter the market that's got less competition and increase our chances of being found on Amazon. So whatever you want to do here in terms of niching down, there's lots of different ways to do it. You can do it kind of like a cross niching or side niching. I don't even know what people call it, but for example, if we had something like a mermaid and unicorn activity book, so we saw that unicorn coloring book was too competitive, so let's kind of niche sideways and crossways and create ourselves a mermaid and unicorn activity book instead. Okay, so mermaid and unicorn activity book. Now I'm not going to go into whether this specific niche has got traffic going to it. That could be for a different video, but let's just assume that it does. Now, what I'd want you to do first off is to ignore the amount of search results. That does not mean that there are 10,000 mermaid and unicorn activity books, as in that very specific combination of that type of activity book. It doesn't mean there's 10,000 of them. That's not how it works. And if that was how that worked, then you would see that every single book would be a mermaid and unicorn activity book. Okay, so that is not how the results work. Okay, so now that we've done this kind of niching down or side niching thing, what we want to do now is go back and do the same thing again that we did with just the unicorn coloring book, which was to see what the direct competition for this book. Okay, so the direct competition for this book, because it's what we're going to be ranking for, will be mermaid and unicorn activity books. We want to see how many other mermaid and unicorn activity books there are. Okay, so that's not unicorn coloring books or mermaid coloring books or mermaid activity books. It's mermaid and unicorn activity books. Okay, so we're going to assume that's got traffic going to it. Now we want to see what our competition is like. There are not 10,000 of these on Amazon. So the way that I like to do this is to see how fast this exact niche dies off the first few pages of Amazon. Okay, and then I assess from there whether or not that's going to increase my chance of being ranked organically, or whether or not I can actually get the book ranked through running ads. Okay, so what I found here from scrolling through here is that things after the second or third page, they start becoming less and less relevant to that specific niche. So if I just come on to the second page here, so what I can see is that there aren't that many specific mermaid and unicorn activity books as I go through here. We have a princess one, mermaid unicorn, I don't know what that is, dot marker activity book, jumbo activity book with all sorts of things in them, unicorn, mermaid and princess. And also when I'm doing this, I'm looking at what the quality of these books are on the first few pages. And if I can see books like this that aren't selling well, if somehow managed to get onto the second page for this niche, then I'm thinking to myself, I can probably do this as well with a good book. Okay, so as I'm scrolling through, I see Peppa Pig, I see Disney, I see whatever that is, I see the Catch a Mermaid, mermaid activity book, unicorn and mermaid coloring book, Scratch and Sparkle. Let's go on to the third page. My Magical, I don't know what that is, mermaid coloring book, unicorn, mermaids and fairies. So yeah, a preschool workbook here. So as I can, what I'm seeing here is that the relevance of this is becoming less and less as I go through after the first sort of couple pages. Okay, whereas with the unicorn coloring book, the broad niche that we started with, there were just pages and pages and pages of book that were somewhat related to unicorn coloring books. Okay, as for unicorn and mermaid activity books, there are some that are kind of related, but it looks like it's losing its appeal as we go through here. Okay, so after I've done this search, what I would say to myself now is that I've got a much better chance of being found organically if I produce a mermaid and unicorn activity book than if I was to produce a unicorn coloring book. Okay, so basically there's a lot of competition for the unicorn coloring book, so therefore it's going to be impossible to rank for. There's less competition for a mermaid and unicorn activity book, which again means that we're going to have more chance of being found through that. Okay, so the next thing here is, after looking through this, there's a little bit of competition still, and things are a little bit fuzzy because there's still like unicorn coloring books and mermaid coloring books, and I'm not quite sure where I'm going to end up if I do produce this book. Am I going to end up on the first page organically? I don't know, I'm not so sure. So I'm going to make the assumption before I make this book that given that there's still some competition, I'm going to assume that I will have to spend some money on ads to get ranked onto the first page. Okay, so if I could niche down to the point where I could find that there was absolutely no competition, then I'd probably get ranked on the first page. But there is some competition, so I will have to spend some money. Okay, so again, in terms of what money we're going to be spending for ads, I don't know. But what we can do again, like we did before, was to check out how much buyer traffic is going to mermaid and unicorn activity books. Okay, so we could do the same thing again, where we look for the mermaid and unicorn activity books. So we're looking at search results of around 50,000 here, 100,000 here, 900,000 here, 127,000 here, 226,000 here. So what I can see for this specific niche is that the BSRs are going to be a fair bit higher than the ones like 200 or 500 for just the unicorn coloring book. Now I know that the low BSRs for these type of books are super tempting. They're very exciting. The thought of actually getting a BSR that low yourself is incredible. It would be incredible, but you got to be realistic here. Like, you're just an independent author, you're just an independent publisher who probably has a low budget that doesn't have a book that's as good as some of these books here that are made that have a publishing backing behind them. Okay, so you've got to be realistic. It doesn't mean that you can't make sales, but doing things this way means you've got a better chance of actually being seen, because you'd rather do things this way and see some sales instead of going for these and seeing absolutely no sales, right? And since the BSRs are higher on these type of books here, the mermaid and unicorn activity books, since they're higher, that means that we probably won't have to spend as much money because there's less buyer traffic, there's less demand. That means we have to spend less money on our ad campaigns. Okay, they're going to have cheaper to run ads to, right? So this probably wasn't the best example because I kind of just pulled mermaid and unicorn activity books off the top of my head, but I think you understand the process here. So this is one of the reasons why people have so many books and they're not making any sales, is because that they're leaving everything to luck. And sure, you can do this. Amazon literally allows you to upload, I don't even know how many books it is, but it's a crazy amount of books per month, and at some point you might get a book that sticks and makes sales. But this definitely isn't a approach that I go for. It's not something that I recommend either. It's something that I've tried, I didn't enjoy. It's kind of spammy, it makes Amazon look very messy, and it promotes, in my opinion, low quality work as well. Okay, so that's why this thought process comes in, so that we can have more success with fewer books. Okay, so just a little bit of change in our approach before we start having the book made can make all the difference when it comes to our sales. Now obviously that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to make money, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to end up on the front page. Things can go wrong, like there's no exact science. Like, if we were creating this mermaid and unicorn activity book, it might be a case of that actually everyone on the front page was heavily running ads to that keyword phrase as well, meaning that it would cost us a lot more money to get ranked onto that first page as well. It's hard to say, but again, what we're doing here is about increasing our chances of making sales, increasing our chances of getting onto the first page, instead of leaving absolutely everything to luck when there is just a few things that we can leave to luck instead. So in my opinion, the worst thing that you can do is to upload these type of books that are in super broad niches. So things like unicorn coloring books, toddler activity books, ketogenic cookbooks, composition notebooks, line journals, and then hoping that you get lucky, because for the most part you won't, and you're going to end up being one of these people that has 4,000 books on their account in order to make money. And if these are the type of niches that you're going after, if you're going after broad niches like unicorn coloring books or cactus notebooks, so things that are so broad and so competitive, then I think you're going to have a very bad experience. And the reality is that you won't make sales because your books are getting lost on Amazon. People aren't seeing your book. So that's why it's so important you think, where is my book going to end up before you even start publishing that book, okay? So the other approach that people take, and you need to keep this in mind as well, that if you're going to go that kind of ultra niche down route to the point where you don't have to run ads, because I know that some people's business model will not revolve around spending money on ad campaigns. So what people do is that they'll take the niche and they'll keep niching it down until they can get found organically. So for example, if you had a keto cookbook, now obviously that's very broad, it's very competitive. So what do people do from there? They niche it down to something like keto cookbook for women, and then they see that that's still competitive. So what do they do from there? They niche down again, keto cookbook for women over 85 or something. Okay, so now you have yourself what was a very large audience filtered down into a very, very specific audience where there's going to be hardly any demand, and therefore there's hardly going to be any sales. So once you're entering markets that don't have much demand, you're going to end up creating more books to make up for it. Okay, so that's the business model that you'd have to go after. And in my opinion, if you do things that way, you're going to end up having to have hundreds towards thousands of books to make money from Amazon KDP. So I'm going to leave my opinion on that pursuit to one side for this video, but just keep that in mind when it comes to operating that way through Amazon KDP. Okay, so let's do another example here. Let's go ahead and use the classic password logbook as an example. Okay, so let's assume that's the type of book that we're going to be going for. The first thing that we want to do is to establish the direct competition to see if we can get ranked organically for just a password logbook. Remember though, that super broad niches are going to be bad for you unless you're willing to spend lots of money on ad campaigns. Okay, so let's go through the first couple pages, the first few pages of Amazon for password logbook, and see how stiff this competition is. Okay, I'm not going to waste your time here because you already know that the first few pages are going to be quite competitive for password logbooks. So what does that leave us to do then? We have those three options where we can run ads to the book, or we can niche down, or we can niche down and run ads. Okay, so those are the three options that we can look at from there. So if we're going to run ads to this book, we need to establish again how hard is it going to be to get ranked on the first page for a password logbook. Okay, so the way that I've been doing that is to take a look at the BSRs for books, see how low they are, see how much traffic is going to password logbooks, and then try and determine how much money I'm going to have to spend to get ranked on the first page. Okay, so what I can see here just by looking at these password logbooks, the competition is pretty stiff. There's not as much demand as there is for something like a unicorn coloring book, but again the BSRs are quite low still for these password logbooks. Like 70,000, it's still quite low. 21,000, that's quite low. 64 is quite low. Again, a lot of these are still quite low, so I'm not going to make the assumption that I'm going to end up on the first page here. Okay, so if I'm at this point where I'm not sure where I'm going to end up, I'm still going to assume that to get to the first page for a niche like this, I'm going to have to spend a fair bit of money. Okay, so that depends. Like, do you want to spend more money, and then the reward for the payoff for getting onto the first page is going to be greater? Obviously the trade-off is that you're spending more money to get there. Or are you going to go for those other two routes that we spoke about, which is to niche down or to niche down and run ads? Okay, so for me, looking at this book, I think what I would want to do, because I think it's just a little bit too competitive for my ad spend budget, I think what I would look to do is to niche down. Okay, so if you're using something like the AMZ suggestion expanders, you can get those niche down ideas quite quickly by using that. So what I'm seeing, we have things like the logbook for seniors, the logbook for women, logbook large print. So I'm going to go and just check out password logbook for seniors. Okay, so people are actively searching for this, but I want to see now how much competition there is, how much direct competition there is, how many password logbooks for seniors there are, and then from there I want to establish how hard it's going to be for me to get on the front page. So what I can see here for password logbook for seniors is that it dies off quite quickly. Those type of specific books that are geared, password logbooks that are geared specifically towards seniors, that dies off quite quickly. But what I could also see was that the BSRs for password logbooks for seniors were also really bad, like 2 million, 7 million here, 2 million here. So if I did go after that, let's assume that the BSRs were slightly better, like 500,000. What I would assume from that is that it's not actually going to take me that much ad spend. Okay, so since there's going to be less buyer demand for this type of book, that means that in order to run ads to these books, it's probably going to be cheaper. So that's going to make it easier for us to get our book pushed up and ranked on the first page for this keyword / niche. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I know I've been rambling on a little bit and not maybe explaining this the best that I could. So what I'm going to give you here to end this video with is the way that I do things, the scenario that works best for me, and that is to niche down. So find a niche that's got traffic going to it, and then niche down and then run ads to it. Okay, so that's basically what I've been doing in a nutshell. So just to give you an example here for one of the coloring books that I had created. So the first niche that I went after was coloring book for seniors. Okay, so what I could see after scrolling through the first few pages of Amazon for coloring book for seniors was that it was quite competitive, and as we can see, a lot of the BSRs are pretty low. I looked at that and I was like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to get ranked on the first couple of pages of Amazon organically, and I also think it's going to cost me too much money to run ads to get myself pushed up to the first pages of Amazon. Okay, so that was not quite the pursuit for me. So what I decided to do from there was to kind of just niche down one more time, because again, I think the coloring book for seniors, I just think that's a bit too broad and too competitive. So I moved down again and I went with something like, I think it was something like butterflies. So it would have been a butterfly coloring book for seniors. Okay, so we went from coloring book for seniors, then we niched down again to butterfly coloring book for seniors. Then I took a look at the demand, realized that it was less demand than something as generic as just a coloring book for seniors. But I also saw that these specific type of butterfly books were dying off of the first few pages quite quickly. And then I looked at it and I thought to myself, you know what, I reckon I can get onto the front page for butterfly coloring book for seniors by running ads to the book. And that's exactly what happened. I think my book was on the third page. Okay, it was a bit unfortunate, I ended up on the third page, but I was like, you know what, maybe $20 to $50 of ad spend per month is going to help me get boosted onto the first page for this keyword. Okay, because you know, running ads, it doesn't matter if you directly make profit from these or not. I use it to break even on the ad spend, but if Amazon sees that your book is getting sales, it's going to push it up the rankings. Okay, so if I was running ads to like butterfly coloring book for seniors, it was on the third page. I ran ads to butterfly coloring book for seniors, it started getting sales through the ads, then it pushed it up onto the front page, and then it started making sales organically. Okay, so I think that's the best way that I can describe how to get ranked on the first page of Amazon for the keywords that you're going after. My advice here, my tip here, is to think about this before you create the book. It is so important. Don't just look at a couple books on Amazon and see that they've got a good BSR rating and then go for that niche randomly. Do more research. It doesn't take that long, honestly. This isn't that hard, and the reward is going to be much better than just relying on luck and volume of book. Okay, so your absolute last option, just before I end this video, is to go wild and just do something completely unique and risk there being absolutely no buyer interest in your book. But of course, the reward for that would be that you're first and you're the one that's going to make all the sales. Okay, so that's not something that I actively do. It's not something that I preach, but there is that option for those of you that are slightly more creative than the average person. Okay, if you have an understanding as to what people want and you have a good idea, then you can pursue that and you can be first and make the sales. But if you're all about increasing your chances of making sales and going where you know that there's going to be buyer traffic, then the approach in this video might be perfect for you. Okay, so that's it for this video. Again, if you want to go to the description and check out the FBA channel, and if you want to check out my free ads course, or do you want to check out all the software that I use, you can go to the description and see all those things. But that's it for this video. I'll see you in another one very soon.